Back home's nice. You got 5 of 7. Just talk about getting back home, and then this is obviously a stretch where you could put some hay in the barn, I would think.
Well, yeah, I've always been a little apprehensive to, um, put anything in a barn ahead of time. It's the same concept that Washington's a really good team coming in here. Been in a lot of even the games that they've lost, it's been competitive right down to the wire, and they're ahead of us in the standings. So, traditionally, and if you look at history, we've defended our home court pretty well, but that's nothing we're going to take for granted. We've got a pretty good game plan um, going in. I expect to have a real solid practice today and get after them Wednesday night. But we're really not looking at those kind of numbers, 5 or 7. We're pretty focused on one. And that one is being the next game that we're playing, and the schedule does tip a little bit, as we look at it. But nothing's to be taken for granted for sure.
Is it just a relief a little bit to get home and finally get through that rough road stretch where, I mean, obviously it's one game at a time, but finally kind of getting through that really tough stretch of the season?
Well, yeah, it's maybe the old adage that you talk about. If it doesn't kill you, it's only going to make you stronger. It's been really difficult, and I don't think has any sympathy for what we've gone through. As I look around, I looked at the standings this morning. I mean, there's a number of teams in our conference that have a couple of little footnotes that things could be going different for them, and everybody's got a unique set of challenges, and ours was a situation where we had to weather a storm, and it's been a little bit NBA-like to me as I think about my family, the lack of time with them, the number of nights we've been on the road. I think we had one of our managers did a little math on it, and basically since the new year when we went to Palo Alto, we've had 18 nights in a hotel. So we're talking about dang near half of our nights, and it's been, obviously when you look at 7 out of 11 being on the road, and some of those with an extra day or two in between the games. So it does feel good. I think we were all excited to get back here, and it allows us some practice time, some class time. I think we're all creatures of habit, and would much rather sleep in our own bed and wake up and come into our office, and it just makes you more efficient, I think, more than anything. And closing off the season where we've only got, prior to Las Vegas now, we've only got one more trip to make, and that's to Southern California to play the USC UCLA. So numbers wise, things tip in our favor a little bit, and it certainly feels good. I think everybody can possibly get their battery charged here.
You look back at the last Washington game where you guys closed out a really tough opponent on the road and beat them in overtime. Kind of considering how these last 2 games went on the road, how do you kind of figure you can get back to that? Is that sort of an energy you can recapture, or is it very much guys just being focused in? What was that?
Well, I think that's a great question, and it's exactly how it's kind of this big. I see it kind of like a cloud that's in a room, whether it's in our locker room after the Oregon game, when things don't go well, and it's really hard to kind of wrap your arms around what it is that went wrong. And it's not always the same thing. I think, there's a lot of little things that go on in the game of basketball. And when you look at the Washington game, we made some plays. We were, our coverages were correct, made shots when we needed to. And then when you run out, in that case, of 45 minutes of the game being over, we managed to make just enough plays. There's so many of these games in our conference that are being decided by 1 or 2 possessions that it's a pretty fine line. And we don't want to have the last play always be the one that's magnified, but take a lot more pride in the possessions leading up to that. And then to answer the question with the Oregon games, Oregon State, we weren't good enough going down the stretch. We built ourselves a 10-point lead and did it the right way. Defensively, shared the ball, made shots. We were really good. for a large portion of that game. And then I think starting at an end out of bounds play where we were kind of milling around, and it's so ironic because in our shoot around, we were guarding end out of bounds plays and everybody was standing up. And as small of a thing as it might seem, you got to be down and engaged, and we call it like have an arm bar and be in a stance, and here comes whatever their set is. And as you watch that play, we were kind of wandering around, had a couple guys that weren't locked in, the referee gave them the ball, and it's a 3-point play. And then we missed the free throw block out, and they hit another basket. So a 10-point lead goes to 5, and you can flash back to that 10 seconds in our shoot-around where I talk about a little thing of being ready on an end-out-of-bounds play. So, that's one of those huge plays, the proverbial 5-point play that could be, man, let's just get locked in. Maybe we got a chance to take the 10-point lead to 12. So that's the way basketball rolls, is it's not always energy. Sometimes it's brains, and sometimes it's a matter of making open shots. It's never the same story on any game, and I think that's why watching college basketball is pretty intriguing, because there's a lot of unknowns and different storylines. It's not boring. You can't always predict the future or the ending, and we've just got to get dialed in and take a lot more pride, as I said, in possessions throughout the course of the game and not be making mistakes, and making it as tough as we can on the other team instead of beating ourselves. I have no problem getting beat. I don't like when we make mistakes and I feel like we beat ourselves.
Coach, when you're facing back-to-back losses, what can you learn from your team when they're facing adversity like this, and maybe at this point in the season too, where you want to get things on track with the tournament and all that on the horizon?
Well, it's really no different than if you win 2 games. I don't know how much you take into it for the next game and start thinking about how you feel good and, man, we got to keep this rolling. It's really a stay in the moment, point. And we learned a lot from the Oregon losses, and it's got to be just as I said. Let's figure out how to win the first 4 minutes against Washington and control some of our own destiny without regard to what took place in the past or the fact that we got a bunch of home games coming up. I think it's more of the sense of urgency to just be in the moment right now. And we've got a resilient group based on our practice yesterday, and the guys were ready to come in. Nobody feels sorry for themselves. And a little bit of it's having to struggle together, That was something that came up yesterday. It's interesting because the word compassion is part of our program. That's one of our words in our program. And as I was doing yoga yesterday, the instructor talked about how it was a big week for compassion. And compassion in her definition, and there's millions of definitions of it, we talk about coming with passion on every play and how you treat people. But she had an interesting comment, was that compassion is not necessarily to be confused with empathy, where you could feel sorry for somebody. But compassion was actually more of the concept of you have to struggle together, and if you want to take action rather than feeling sorry for somebody, jump in their shoes with them, try to lift them up and help them. And it was just a real unique and interesting twist on a word that's already in our program. So we've kind of built this little shack for ourselves we're struggling, we've got a couple of losses, we got to deal with it, and we've got to do, just as in the yoga class, let's find a way to pick each other up and try to lift the level of our play.